UCDA is a professional organization for creatives working in higher ed. So we provide programming like this and professional development opportunities for both staff designers and design educators. This series, Elevating Black Design Voices, was born from a desire and to support and learn about what it means to be a Black designer and provide a platform for discussions. We also wanted to showcase the amazing work that is being done and support the professional development of our audience. So today's conversation is with 4 faculty, design faculty members from the Ontario College of Art and Design University, OCAD, Angela Bains, Kestin Cornwall, Kathy Moscou, and Michael Lee Poy, and a current student, Sydney Gittens. So since we slated today's program for 90 minutes, we'll hopefully have time to get to questions that you have. So add them in the chat window and we'll try to address them as we can. So I'd like to start things off today by introducing Angela Bains to give us a bit of background on the historical hiring at OCAD and to share a bit of her story. So welcome, Angela.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Before I start, what I would like to do is do a land acknowledgement for OCAD University. And this is something that we do for basically every meeting, whether it is virtual or in person. So I'd like to just say, the OCAD University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. And it's important that we recognize the Indigenous people of Canada, and especially in the context as we're talking now about representation and recognition and also justice. So hello everybody, so my name is Angela Bains. I'm the Graduate Program Director of Strategic Foresight and Innovation, and I'm also an Assistant Professor at OCAD University in the Advertising Program. And really today what we talk about is, we talk about representation and how what OCAD did in terms of the Black cluster hiring basically broke a 144-year run or reign of underrepresentation. And so the fact that we're here today is a testimony to where things, we hope, where things are going in the right direction, and also that we can sort of lead that in terms of what other people in the world can do within their own university settings. So I'll just give you a little brief background about the hiring itself and how the Black cluster hire, how they were able to do that at OCAD. And so we were hired under a specific hiring process, and that was able to come about because of 3 main things. One was the United Nations actually have the Decade for People of African Descent, and that runs from 2015 to 2024. And that was ratified by the General Assembly of the United Nations. And it talked about, that particular piece of legislation talked about recognition of Black people, justice, and also development. And so that was the umbrella. So that was one. Number 2 was the Ontario Human Rights Commission here in Canada. And that Ontario Human Rights Code really talked about the fact, again, recognition, respect, and also the fact that every person within every human being is entitled to dignity and respect. And also free from just discrimination. And so that was the second part of that particular code. And then the third part that OCAD used was the actual OCAD-U academic plan, which within that plan talks about decolonization. And we are a product of that effort. And it also talks about the commitment to diversity and the commitment to equity as well. So there are 3 main components that enabled OCAD to have the Black cluster hire. When we look at that, we also have to honor the people within OCAD the professors within OCAD and the staff within OCAD who and I think it was at least, and maybe one of you guys can remind me, but I know it's over 10 years that some of the Black faculty were pushing to increase the number of Black faculty within OCAD. The student experience warranted an increase in Black faculty at OCAD. And under the leadership of Dean Dorrie Tunstall, along with veteran professors such as Lillian Allen, Andrea Fortuna, Camille Isaacs, I think, is also one of those pushing for this to happen. And so under the leadership of Dean Dorrie Tunstall, this was able to basically to be pushed through and to be basically to get people behind it to support the Black cluster hire. One of the things that within the actual, should I say, the actual interview process and the advertising of the actual Black cluster hire, that in itself was highly unusual. And that was one of the things that really surprised me when I read the stipulations, because I'd never seen any advertising like that before for a position. It was just so different. And it really spoke to us as Black professionals and how we have experienced our lives and how we navigated our own professional path, and also spoke to what we could do in the community and what we have done in the community, and changing the traditional ways of looking at hiring, which is you need to have gone through this specific path of, having a PhD, or, having worked as a professor, or, all those traditional things that you would normally have that aren't always open to us as Black people. And some of us choose different paths. So I don't have a PhD. I didn't do that particular path. I did go to university and I did study at college, but I spent 30 years working in the industry, right? So that was the change that had to happen in terms of how they were going to do the hiring. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up myself, and then I'm going to pass the baton. So I I started out life as a graphic designer. I had 2 graphic design businesses. I've worked with clients all over the world. I've worked with large corporations. I've worked with international companies. I've worked with social change all over the world as well. And that was one of the I think, I shouldn't say, but I think that's one of the key things that got me into the position that I'm in today, is also that business experience as well. So I'm going to, I feel as if I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to hand the baton over probably to Michael, I think, and we can hear a little bit from him.
Hi, everybody. Afternoon. Yes, fabulous experience. And luckily we have a student that was part of the experience that could give us insight into that process. Nothing that she can't reveal officially. But thank you for inviting us. I'm actually in Trinidad and Tobago, largely due to the pandemic, but our response by the government has been actually excellent, and I could have been in Canada a year ago. There's been regular flights, and the protocols have been established a long time ago. So most of the people have been back to work, not the public servants, unfortunately, but that's coming soon. Anyways, I'm a registered architect in Trinidad and Tobago. I've been here about 16 years permanently. My parents are from here. I've spent most of my life between Montreal, which is where I was born, New York, Brooklyn, and Trinidad. So I grew up in 3 countries, which sounds very normal to me, but I know a lot of people haven't experienced that at all. But that's okay. That's part of my Afro-Caribbean history, and I find it a luxury when I hear people that have never moved from their hometown. like for generations, right? So that's very strange because my heritage is African, Scottish, Venezuelan, indigenous, and I think one or two others too. And that's the nature of the Caribbean. It doesn't mean there's no racism here or colorism. It's all the same pretty much everywhere. If for instance, for example, within the context of media and marketing, I think up until about 10 years ago, you wouldn't see a person darker than me in any of the adverts, right? And the mixing and the African has been here for hundreds of years. So based on that, we still have racism and all of that. I practice Afro-Caribbean festival design, mostly carnival, and I teach and make stilts, Mokujumbi specifically, and that's an African practice. So I teach kids and share that experience with them as much as possible, just to balance, right? I'm teaching them how to balance, and once you experience it yourself, it's kind of this very strange a practice, because not only you're learning how to stop thinking, especially with adults. It's easier with kids, and you could see people's faces change. That, oh, it didn't look so hard to do this, and some get it very quickly and not. But part of that experience and that practice, I'm bringing to OCAD as an architect designer as well, and that's it for me as I pass it on to Angela. Would you like to chair this since you introduced?
Well, next we'll introduce Kathy. I think.
Welcome. My name is Kathy Moscou. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm speaking to you from St. Catharines, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. The territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I have to say that, I just to tag on to a little bit about what Angela had said about this Black Cluster Hire is it really deeply moved me. Angela mentioned that we all might have different pathways, and I actually do have a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences of all things. And I just wanted to say that what impressed me about that advert is the fact that it recognized on an equal level at the academic degree that people bring to the table, along with lived experience. And so it mattered little which pathway that you chose, but we wanted to value and recognize that the Black lived experience was important. And it was important in terms of decolonizing the curriculum. Now, I have to say that with my eclectic background, I actually am a visual artist, as well as an academic, as well as a health professional. And what that does is that it helps me to have a very broad definition of design. I do program design, I do policy design, I do curriculum design, but also I think of design in terms of product design and graphic design. And so I'm using speculative design in my practice, both in my teaching as well as in the research that I do, in order to vision a different future, a future that has equity and social justice involved in it. So I do research in those particular areas. So I think that what OCAD has done is to become a trailblazer. And interestingly enough, there are any number of universities now that OCAD University did the Black Cluster Hire, that any number of universities in Canada are all trying to scramble to put together their own cluster hires. So this is like a trailblazing kind of moment that I'm thrilled to actually be a part of. And, I was mentioning earlier that my humble beginnings began in the United States. I actually am a citizen of Canada and the United States. And I have, I'm a product of the housing projects in New York City. You know, my very first art class is at the housing project. I was 5 or 6 years old and I had to walk there, you know, and it was like a local artist who showed me what art could do, you know, and gave me that step up to think about, you know, about how to be creative, which I have taken on to think about how to be creative in terms of how arts, the aesthetics and design can come together to improve the health of communities and to just improve our and health, looking at it sort of holistically in terms of social, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So I'm going to leave it there and move on to Kestin.
Thanks. I'm from Windsor, Detroit. My mom's from Detroit. My dad came here from Grenada. So I grew up in the Windsor, Detroit area, just outside of Windsor. It's a weird place to kind of grow up because while I was growing up, the car industry was leaving Detroit. And so the economy was just bombing. There's just a lot of poverty and despair. And luckily Windsor was attached to Canada and there were more benefits. So there wasn't as much job loss, but there was still a lot of job loss. And I'd spent a lot of time with family in Detroit, which gave me the opportunity to see like a culture clash. I remember one of the earliest times I'd go to Windsor and I'd hang out with my friends in Windsor and I'd be the only black guy at the rock concert. I didn't care, it was fun. And I remember convincing my white friends to come to Detroit with me, and they were the only white guys at the hip hop concert. And that was where we grew up. It was just this culture clash where people from Toronto or people from, Windsor would go to Detroit, get this experience. People from Detroit would come to Windsor and get this experience. And Detroit, early on, because it was so neglected by the government, people in their neighborhoods would actually burn down abandoned houses because they would be taken over by all kinds of people that you didn't want in the neighborhood. And people from Windsor would be able to see this. And there's all kinds of different documented events that happen. And what's interesting is that people in Detroit brought their beauty and their culture there in how they dressed. So their hats and their vibrant shirts and their shoes. And it was just this entirely different experience in Windsor where there were gardens and there were people doing planting, but people would dress and very differently, a lot of grays and browns. And they didn't have to bring that beauty to the neighborhood because it was already there in a different way. And my mom would take me to art galleries and she'd take me to see my uncles and all these different experiences from spending time in Detroit and seeing that really raw poverty and people trying to come up. And my grandparents worked hard and they weren't in that neglected area, but I would see it all the time. From there, I just wanted to be in the arts. And I remember my mom showed me how to draw an elephant. And the feeling I got when she did that and the fact that that picture had said so much with just an image, I knew I just wanted to do art. I didn't see anyone else doing it. And I realized once I got older that people need to see people that look like them in order to understand what they can potentially do or be. Like most people do what they see. Almost everyone, people will join a job because that's what their father did or that's what their family member did. And because of there's a lack of options in certain communities, it's really important for things like what OCAD did to bring value to the institution, but also give students something to see and guide themselves towards. So I lucked out because my mom was taking me to museums and I was really a type of person that would look into things. And I didn't know how, but I knew that I had to keep myself busy. I love football, I love sports, but I noticed the guys that just did work stayed out of trouble. And that's just what I did. I just kept working and I didn't have the tools to just do art full time. So I had to have jobs. And I just had this one goal. I was just gonna keep working on art, and it allowed me to try design. It allowed me to start a clothing company. I sold over 5,000 t-shirts. It allowed me to have fashion shows. It allowed me to start the small design studio. It allowed me to open a design studio in Toronto, which was like an art hub, and we'd all have events there. And that led me to more design and getting more into fine art and having gallery shows and getting introduced to New York and sleeping in cars and going to Montreal and sleeping in a parking garage because we didn't have enough money for a hotel, but we were there for the art show. And the contacts that I made and the people I met gave me more experiences and knowledge that eventually this opportunity came up. And the opportunity was listed like me. It was listed in this it wasn't just you had to do this one thing. It was so nuanced, and it was like me. It was like going through these steps where I had to do things that were outside the box in order to get to where I wanted to get to. And that's what the requirements were. So I was like, this is the first time I line up something with something like this. And I think how Dory went about it, how the other leaders at OCAD went about it was perfect. Obviously, there's always room for improvements. And I'm sure they're working on that for the next hires they do. But my experience was good. I have to say my overall experience was good. And I got to meet these amazing people. They're all an inspiration to me, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you all.
That's great. So now you've heard a little bit about us. There's also one other cluster hire who will be joining us in the summer. His appointment was a little bit delayed because of COVID, but you know, we just want to recognize him that he will actually be joining us at some point this year. So you've heard a little bit about us, and we've also have with us today Sydney Gittens. And Sydney, interestingly enough, was actually part of the hiring committee. So there were students on that hiring committee, as well as you know, various levels of people within OCAD itself. So it's interesting we have Sydney here, who could maybe talk a little bit about you know, her experience at OCAD, and then you know, the Black Cluster interviews, and then perhaps maybe a little bit about your experience as a student now that you've sort of experienced the Black Cluster hire.
Yeah, of course. So as I was kind of thinking while you guys were talking, this is something that I had never really thought about, but the general idea of this cluster hire, the results of it, the experience, as well as just this general idea of a Black cluster hire is something that really impacts my very young career as an art director. So I'm a fourth year advertising student, and something that was really important to Dean Dory was to have student representation on the hiring committee, but as well as Black student representation. So as a part of the OCAD community, I had been a part of a few different committees, no hiring committees before this one, but I was a part of a curriculum committee, and then a committee that talks about student discipline in terms of like appealing decisions to expel students. So those were two committees that I loved being a part of, and Dory recognized my relationship with the OCAD community in that way. And she invited me to be a part of this committee, which I was really, really happy about. And I had no idea what I was going to expect, but when I went into this experience, it definitely wasn't anything that I was expecting for a bunch of reasons. One is that as it was mentioned before, the different ways that people could get into this position, the different pathways, were very clearly defined, but they weren't defined in any way that one would expect when going into a hiring committee for a university. There were many different pathways that were very clearly identified. There was, you know, the traditional Ph.D. pathway to becoming a professor, but there were also, you know, very clearly defined pathways that involved working in the industry, as well as teaching, not necessarily at a post-secondary level, but teaching in your communities. And those were valued just as much as the experiences teaching in an institution. And those were very clearly defined at the beginning of the hiring process, which was really important to me. So as we were going through that process, I was able to see so many different kinds of representation in terms of people who could be teaching me one day, people who I never would expect to be university professors. So at the end of the day, it was also very different because the cluster hire was just wrapping up at the beginning of a pandemic. You know, we were supposed to have this incredible ceremonial thing where we invited people to Toronto and took tours of the university campus. And right before that was supposed to happen, everything shut down and we moved to doing the final interviews over Zoom, which was also crazy. But another crazy part of this is that I actually got to reap the benefits of this cluster hire when I was picking my courses for my first semester of my last year, and I was picking my thesis, the part 1 of my thesis class. You know, there was one professor who I knew really, really well, who had taught me before, and I saw his name first, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna pick that class. I scrolled down a little bit further, and I see Angela's name. And I was like, I need to be in that class. If I'm not in that class, I'm gonna complain to someone. I need to be in that class. So I got to reap the benefits of being a part of a cohort that Angela was actually teaching and actually experiencing it in the moment, experiencing the way that her being brought in was going to impact my student experience. And it impacted my student experience greatly. I saw, you know, a person who I consider to be, you know, an incredibly brilliant designer who reflected me. I said multiple times to my writing partner that you know, Angela's exactly who I want to be when I grow up. That's who I want to be. And that was really incredible. And then also this just general idea of a cluster hire or a Black cluster hire was something that impacted me as well. So in May, I'm going to be an art director at Toronto advertising agency Taxi, but I interned there in the same fall I was taking Angela's class. And the way I got into that was what some people would essentially call a cluster hire. I was a part of a program called Black Taxi, where they hired a set of interns that specifically came from the Black community. That was what the call was. It was advertised as that. And I got to experience part of what these guys experienced when they were going into OCAD, and this idea of the cluster hire, where you hire all of these people all at once so they don't feel alone in their organization. I got to experience that, and I got to make some really, really great friends there who I still talk to today, and who, you know, I will be working with come a couple months from now. So that was really great, where we got to form this community in an organization that was full of people that we could go to, people that we could talk to about anything that was going on. And yeah, so at the very beginning stages of my career, of course, I'm not even a full-time worker yet. The idea of a cluster hire and the impacts of this particular cluster hire have completely changed the direction that I'm gonna go down in the future.
Wow. Wow, I didn't realize I had that impact on you. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. But this is what it's all about, right? This is the benefit of the Black cluster hire. As others were saying, it's, you know, do you see yourself reflected in the classroom, right? And do you see yourself reflected in the world? And if you do, then, you know, that can change your trajectory, you know, completely. So yeah, thanks for that, Sydney. I think that was absolutely amazing. I should also just build on what Sydney was just talking about there, about the experience in the classroom. I know we had conversations in the advertising class, and some of those conversations we had about the impact of race on the way that you work, the impact of race on, you know, what you perceive you can do, what doors would be open or closed to you, and we opened that discussion. We talked about our experiences of Black people, and I remember recalling in the classroom that I was as you guys are, I was actually on a Zoom. I was part of the Zoom audience, and someone's asked the question, what would you be doing if there wasn't racism, or what would your life be like if there wasn't racism? And they were talking to the guests who were Black, and I sort of posed that question in the class as well. And I remember some of the students said, I wouldn't have to work 10 times as hard. I wouldn't have to work 20 times as hard to get to, one step. But that's what we've all had to do. We've had to work twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, 100 times harder to get to positions. And this is the one time with this hiring that I thought, wow, you really could just take your entire life and actually apply for this job, right? You could actually apply for this position. And I would never have thought that I would be a professor. I was teaching part-time, just as an instructor at the local technical institution here in Vancouver. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, by the way. I don't think I said that. And but to be teaching in a university as a professor, no. I'm just like, no, I don't have a PhD. There's no way that could happen for me. And I actually happened to be hosting an event. I met Dory, and she mentioned that they were having this black cluster hire, and she was saying, "Oh, you should apply for it." And I basically said, "Why would I want to do that? I've got my business here, right? Everything's great. I'm already teaching, but something just kept ringing in my ears, and I kept looking at the link that she'd sent me." And I thought it was just so magical the way that they'd written this this job hiring, and it talked about work in the community, and it talked about hip hop, and it talked about music, and it talked about Black futures, and all those things grabbed me because I thought, well, where else in the world would there be a hiring with based on these aspects? Nowhere, I believe, nowhere. But so that to me was some of the sort of magical moments sort of leading up to that. So let me just throw a question out to everyone here. So I just mentioned the things that were in the hiring description about the hip hop, etc. Just give me a little bit about how you guys interpreted that and how you sort of felt connected to what was being asked.
I can go for sure. That's what raised me. Like outside of when my mom was working or my dad's working and I'm with friends, or hip hop had such a huge influence on my life, and people take it for face value and they hear the face value, the sugar coated curse words, and this and that, and they just dismiss it as just not necessarily top of the line music. But if you listen to specific artists like Nipsey Hussle or Tupac or Nas, they're literally giving you Jay-Z, a step-by-step path coded into these songs on how to be successful. Sure, there's all those toppings that some people are put off by, or some people don't want their kids to listen to, but underneath those toppings is a straight up path. And hip hop had such a huge impact on my life. When I saw that in the requirements, it pulled me in. It said someone who put this together understands culture, and they understand what's going on right now, and it was a great detail to add. How do you feel about it, Michael?
I was just going to jump in, Kestin. Thanks. Agreed, and also just to toggle back to the hire, it was posted that they wanted 3, and they actually got 5, right? Because we were so good, and maybe our prices weren't as high as better candidates. I'm not sure how that works, but the notion of this bundling, right, of a team is very important in a white institution, because if I went in solo, I wouldn't have lasted 6 months, right? And I think most of us either, just because it's just wired that way. And that's the reason why we were hired as well. It's to change that dynamic and also stay together as much as possible, and then work together as much as possible, right? Unfortunately, the pandemic has kept us apart, but to me, we haven't even started, right? This is just an appetizer. We're just warming up and onboarding as well. And in regards to Kestin, what Kestin said, I was in New York during the hip hop years, and similarly witnessed the crack epidemic in Bed-Stuy, and it's just, it's ugly. It was ugly, 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 ugly. And I went to school at Pratt, and I walked about 12 blocks. That's how far we were from Pratt. And Jay-Z was in the Marcy Project, so that's about 2 blocks away from me. Not that I ever met him or I know him or anything like that, but it was all in the same vicinity. And just to witness, your Black culture just decimated by drugs and teenagers and all of that, just really sad. But to also in this higher recognize those African systems like rap, which is a African griot communication system. What we saw with Versus, that's just another repeat again of the same way we communicate, or as Kestin said, code things, and it's Black code. And a lot of that has been erased, right? Or not, identified. I mean, Kestin spoke about the Olmec heads in Mesoamerica that have been there for thousands of years, and those are broad-nosed, big-lipped people, images of people. And the fact that I'm just going to wrap it up with I'm in Trinidad and Tobago because my parents were born here. And I see brown and Black faces every day. And the level of comfort I have just because of that, doesn't mean they're nice people, doesn't mean I'll talk to them or anything like that. Just the visual comfort for me, born and raised in Canada and lived in North America, is really gratifying. And it's not that I don't have white friends, I have 1 or 2, I'm just kidding. But I have a ton of friends, and it's different. And that's why I always invite my white friends to come to Trinidad during Carnival to see the festival, because it's absolutely mad. And a friend of mine that came here said, people should be rioting. This is what a riot looks like. And everyone's just jumping up to music. And that's all what people want to do, whether it's New York, Toronto, Caribana, Montreal. It's just this idea of freedom, emancipation for one day. And the challenge is that America, Canada, has never negotiated the gathering of colored people, BIPOC people. There must be police, no matter what, whether we're barbecuing or whatever, that, somehow it's illegal, somewhere, somehow. And that to me is erased because I'm here in the Caribbean, and that it's a different thing. So I pass it on to Kathy. And
I was just going to jump in, so this is a good time, because so much of what is being said resonates with me internally. I moved back to thinking about this whole idea of a cluster hire and the whole idea of coded language, and certainly within the language of that job advert was a coded language that if you are Black, you understand what is being asked for of you. And that's why, jumped out, because like Angela, probably like all of us, is like, I don't know, could I really get this job? When I think about my background, I'm like, they're gonna hire me at an art institution, so no matter where we came, what place we came from, we all questioned it. Having said that, though, we understood what was actually being asked for of us by joining the Faculty of Design at OCAD University, and bringing those kind of community connections to bring that presence of who we are culturally into an institution which historically didn't have it. And so when I think about what Michael said about how if we had all been there just by ourselves, that maybe we wouldn't make it. And I would want to question that, because I think that as Black people, we are resilient people. And each of us have experience being the only one. I can tell you that I was the only one in school. I was the only one in all of my degree levels. I was the only one at almost every job I've ever been at. And so this is one of the few times where I'm not the only one, you know, and there is something there's having that critical mass is actually really important. And it's really important, not just for us, which it is, you know, because I think of all the opportunities to collaborate with you, you know, it's also, I think, important for the student experience as well. That by having that, by number one, having us there, I hope, and Sydney can correct me, that I hope the message that I'm sending to students is, hey, I was resilient. I made it through all the garbage in this system here with institutional racism, whatever, but I'm here. I'm here today, and that I'm a model for the fact that you too can actually be there. I know that I'm also a student advisor, you know, because I'm in the graduate program as well. I have an appointment to the School of Graduate Studies. And so for one of the few times that Black students and even non-Black students, you know, they have the opportunity to actually get that graduate supervision. Whereas before, I understand that, you know, there might be like every Black student wants to work with Lily and Ellen, you know, this is like one person can't do it all. And so now it's like an opportunity to sort of spread it around a little bit. And so we can, more of the Black students have the opportunity to gather insight and to be and to learn from how do you navigate, as Kestin was saying, how do you navigate the pathways? How do you navigate the challenges? How do you remain resilient in order to finally achieve the goals that you want to achieve as a Black person? And so I think that's really important in having that critical mass, as opposed to what typically happens is you hire one, and then the expectation is, I am not the voice for every Black person, you know, but the expectation is going to be that because I'm the only one there, I'm going to be that voice. And so now there are at least 5, well, I think probably 11 voices now at OCAD University, all which I think is really important.
I wanted to actually just, you know, maybe clarify something for Michael. Actually, so the end goal was always 3, and we had gone through the final interviews and we were trying to narrow it down and we just couldn't narrow it down. And then one of the faculty members just said, "Can we have all of them?" And that was just kind of a speculative question, you know, what if? And I think it just goes to the tenacity of Dory Tunstall, where she was like, sure, I'm gonna go and ask for it. And she went and asked for it. And, you know, there was a little pushback at first, but she's, you know, anyone who knows Dory she's a very powerful person, and she got what she wanted, and we wanted all of you guys.
What I also noticed about Dory is she understands how to deliver a message. Like, her delivery is really, it gets the point across. She obviously had a huge part in laying that requirements together to get us there, but she also had to be the liaison, or the person in the middle, to explain to this majority white university what needs to be done. And there's old videos of Dory online that you can watch. I suggest everyone on here go watch them. The message that Dory's trying to get across is so valuable, and it's so relatable and spoken in a way that everybody can understand. I just want to point on something Kathy pointed out. I think Michael and Angela said it as well. But I saw Black cluster hire, and I have a lot of white friends, so I like to get like other points of views. And one of the things is you're getting hired because you're Black, right? That's the initial. People will say that, and it's if you take a moment to comprehend the whole, take in history, take in the current situation, take in the university, and you pull back and you look at the whole picture, it's a ridiculous thing to say, because you're clearly not being hired just because you're Black. And even if you are, there's reasons and justifications for both sides, and it's needed. So you have to have all these requirements, plus you're Black. So it's almost more that you need to do in order to get the position. So for people to use as a reason that you shouldn't be there, it's almost a ridiculous argument. I can understand where people might come from, but I think that's valuable to take into consideration when you're thinking about doing a cluster hire. There's lots of people will always, it's a difficult thing to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And as a Black person, you're constantly, especially Michael may not have the same situation because he's surrounded by Black people, and I'm a little bit jealous. But when you grow up with Black family, you're with your family. You spend time with your Black friends. You're just with your friends. But then you go out and sit at different parties, and over time you have certain interactions where you start to realize that when you walk in a room and how you approach certain people, you have to approach it knowing that you're a Black male or knowing that you're a Black female. And it's we're one of the few groups that have to do that constantly. For instance, if I run up to a car, right, as a Black male versus running up to a car as a white male, the reaction from the person in the car potentially is vastly different. Or running up to a door, my car breaks down and I run up to some door that I'm not aware of who's behind the door. It's a house and I'm running up to the door. How the reaction for me versus how the reaction for another male could be vastly different. This comes from me going to New York. I'm with my friends. John is a 6'2" white male. He's wearing a hoodie. Walks in, Black hoodie. Store owner has no problem with him in the store. I come in a minute after, no hoodie. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I walk in, the store owner starts to reach underneath the counter. He's feeling threatened. I'm just in the store. And these are situations that you have to navigate just to survive. Then you have to not just survive, you want to be successful. And to be successful, now you have to network, you have to find funding, and there's countless hurdles that you have to do that Kathy is aware of, Michael's aware of, Angela's aware of, I'm aware of, Sydney's aware of, Dory's aware of. But you remove Black people from that conversation, and it's almost impossible for them to understand because they haven't lived it. And there's small microaggressions to far more blatant things like that store owner, or even far more blatant things like interactions I've had with police or interactions with other professors and teachers. Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
No, I'm tagging on to what you're saying.
Please do, because I love this conversation.
Because I grew up in Montreal, and my auntie and uncle were in Bed-Stuy, so our vacation was driving 7 hours down to New York and back and forth. And that border, I could give you the list of times that I was kept there for hours, and I had my visa, to go to Pratt and all of that. And until one time, and you don't go and ask twice because you're going to wait even longer, right? And so I did that, made that mistake because I had to get to school in class, and they went and called my mother, and this is early must have been after 12, and I know she cussed them out bad, because he came back scared, and it's like, Mom, you go ahead. Thank you so much. Just because it's constant, it's just absolutely constant. I've gone across with white friends, and I with a kid, 11-year-old, and we're jacked up against the counter, and my white friends are sitting down there, cool, same car, left the same house, going to the same house, and so incidents like that. But just to toggle back to what I think Kathy said, I never found the urge to be better, I guess, because I came from a very solid family background. My mother's a teacher, father was an accountant, and we got to see multiculturality in Trinidad, where doctors, lawyers were Black, Asian, Indian, Southeast Asian. I mean, and so when I went to Yale, did my master's, and a Black professor told me straight up, Michael, you have to work 10 times harder. I was like, for what? Who am I competing with? Are you crazy? That's when, W. Bush's kids were there, the two daughters. And I was like, dude, there's no competition here. This is wired against me 100%. That's why I went to study with Robert Ferris Thompson, actually a white person that knew all the African languages and taught that Afro-Caribbean and African American history through design and art. That was the only reason I was there. And that was in a different school, not even architecture. So just to add to that, as well as the allyship that Dean Dorey had to do in order to pull this together. Phenomenal. I mean, it's throughout the school, she had to get support to do this. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened, right? Tremendous allyship. That has to happen as well. And if everything is if the stars are lined up, it would happen. But and there is pushback. We all know there's pushback. We see it. I pass it on to you, Kathy or Angela.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. Is it perfect? No. Was there pushback? Absolutely. But you know, Dean Dorey, she did it, and she is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and she's definitely one of my heroes. And just to sort of build on what we were just talking about here, I think it's important because I'm sure there are white professors and people from other universities listening as well, and I think it's important if people are thinking about doing this, is to recognize that we as Black people live in a system, and whether you're in Australia or you're in France or you're in England or you're in the United States, wherever, we are living in a system that was never designed for us. When the colonialists were at the table and the imperialists were there, we were not part of the equation that would benefit from any kind of system. If anything, we were basically bought and sold, and we were just basically commodities, right, to be bought and sold. And so we were not considered worthy to be within those systems. But now, as times have changed, we are. But we are existing within systems that were not built for us, and still within systems that people hold the power and do not want to let that go, to open those doors to let us in. And 144 years that OCAD University, had been around, 145 this year, but 144 years, and this is the first time they've ever hired 5 Black people at once. So I'm just going to leave that there. Maybe I'll throw that over to Sydney or Kathy.
Well, that's 5 Black people at once for tenured positions, and which is a big deal. Which I think part of the question that I was going to ask, and I'll throw it out there after I make my comment, is what do you think, or how would you say that your lived experience has informed your teaching in the classroom? And I listened to part of what you're saying, Angela, and it's the fact that we have this lived experience for me is that I can share this not from a textbook way and not from textbook knowledge, but I feel this experience in what I'm sharing. I can explore and talk with authenticity about what it means, what structural racism means, to me individually. I laughed when Kestin was talking earlier, about, we got hired in part because of who we are, and on top of, what skills that we bring to the table. That's what I want to say. And I have to say that even throughout my life, I have forever, in every position that I've been in, have been told, oh, you got this position because you're Black. So in reading this, even not clearly when that wasn't the case. So in reading this job description, it's just like, you could only get this position if you were Black, whatever you brought to the table. And I'm like, hell yeah, that's good. Like it's about time, I say the time for apologizing for having a position because you're Black is over. It is time for us to take our rightful place, for acknowledging what it is that we bring to the table and the expertise that we bring to the table, and be unapologetic for that. That's what's really important. I know that in my classroom, I can bring in all kinds of, one of the classes I teach is the Design for Health Context for Design. And I bring in guest speakers to this class. And every single guest speaker that I brought into the class is a person of color. They're Black people, Indigenous people. And typically that's not going to happen, if the class is taught by somebody else. And so this is the value I know that I bring to my teaching. And I'm just curious, in my question to everybody else is, what does it mean to you that your lived experience is how do you recognize that in your classroom?
I think maybe we could jump over to Sydney on that, and maybe she could give us an example of how, because she's experienced it, right? And then we can jump in afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela came into this particular class that I was in at a very interesting time because the advertising program was completely changing and the way that we did our thesis work was completely changing. And you can see that lived experience in the way that the new curriculum was written and the way the new curriculum was taught to us. And also just the experiences that we had in class. I had never had a class before where we all sat around virtually and talked about race. And we were given, me and another student actually were given, the opportunity to talk about our experiences as Black people. Me and actually my roommate who was in the other room, we were given the opportunity to talk about our experiences as Black people in the context of our university class, which is something that I had never had before. And getting to see that lived experience that Angela brought to our class, and then also allowing us to amplify our lived experience, was something that you can't get unless you have a person, a Black person in that classroom. You can't get that experience at all. And I think, kind of bridging off of what Kathy was talking about in terms of what the job description was, is it was a complete change of those power dynamics where a lot of diversity hiring is, you need us. We are giving this to you. We are giving this to the community. But in this instance, it was, we need this. And they wrote this job description and said, these are the things that we need. And almost by default, the only people who can bring it to us are Black people.
Well said. Very well said. It changed how we approached it, and how they approached it was, from my position, was, you need me, and this is why you need me. This is why you need Michael, right? And they were explaining why they needed us. It was definitely interesting and different.
Agreed.
I would say, go ahead, Michael.
I just lost it. Kestin, yeah, yes, I agreed with that. I think we all discussed this, that we were all so very surprised because we came to it at the last minute, watching this hire like it was fantasy almost, right? And it seemed like that. It really did, but something kept calling you back. It's like, I really need to do this. And to me, it was, the night before, right? Pretty much submitting for this and never thinking I would get hired. But my lived experience, I just had a wonderful class yesterday, design. It's called Social Space, and not all the students showed up, but my lived experience as a father, I have two teenage kids, 12 and 16, allowed me, and listening, and also going to all the workshops. OCAD-U has a ton of workshops that are assisting us in dealing with this remote learning and teaching experience, which is crazy, like Sydney said. But it allowed me to get comfortable to talk to students that had no work, right? And I said, listen, we're at the stage, we're close to the end of the semester. I need at least a concept, right? And it allowed them, and my experience, patience as a father, to say, hey, just talk to me about what this idea is, share it with the other students. None of them have cameras on, right? And let's see if we can all imagine this. And it happened. And it was so delightful, that it could happen. It's the first time in months, and it was very successful. And most of the students spoke. I have students in China, Iran, and all over Canada. And especially for the English language learners, and it's not just the Black students, it's giving them that space and that support to practice their English, because they're afraid, right? A lot of them are afraid, and it's difficult, and it's difficult to listen to the silence, right? To just watch our students Very crazy times, but good. And that's my lived experience as a father and as a designer that allowed me to, be patient with myself and not to, not to freak out with this wild system here. Go ahead, Kathy.
I want to go back a little bit to what Sydney was saying about saying that for the first time that she was in a class where you could openly discuss race, and I do that regularly in all my courses. But I just wanted to say that I'm hoping that what it is that we, by having this Black Cluster Hire, are doing is creating a safe space for students to talk about, and the classes to talk about race. And so in that conversation, you always have to worry about, are there going to be microaggressions? And if I like to think that I can pick up on those microaggressions and I can support the students the Black students who are in the class when those things are said, in order to help to navigate and support the student in a way that otherwise wouldn't happen, I think, if I wasn't a Black woman in the class. And so I open up that door in order to have these kinds of authentic conversations for non-Black students to actually learn and to understand as well. So in creating that safe space for those conversations to actually happen. And for me as a professor, it's just like, for most of the time, we check ourselves at the door, but to be in this space and to understand that we're here in order to create this space to have these conversations, that's really important to me. So, it's great support for me, as well as I hope great support for the students in my classes as well.
Yeah, I would,
sorry, as opposed to safe space, accountable.
Yeah. Sorry, just to pick up on what Kathy was saying, and Sydney as well, is having someone who's Black in your class, or someone who is BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, it does open up that safe space, because I've had conversations at OCAD and other institutions that I've worked, and I remember one specific class we had, Sydney, where we were talking about race, and it opened up so that Asian students in our class would talk about their experiences as well, and they recognized, they said, well, my experience isn't like Sydney's, or isn't like other Black people, but this is what I experience as Asian aggression or Asian discrimination when I go outside of my community. And they talked about how safe they felt within their community, but once they go to another town or another city, within that, the experience they face. Coupled with that, I also bring a European experience as well. And within that same class, we talked about, for example, I'm from Britain, and so we had Brexit not too long ago. And I explained what that was actually all about. And that was actually about white Eastern European immigration into the UK. That's what Brexit was really about. So if they say it's anything else, it's not the case. That's what it was about. And so you've got white people discriminating against other white people. Well, if that's the case, what chance do we have, right? And just explaining that and recognizing that even though you're white, you may be white from a different place, but you will also experience some kind of discrimination. I remember one student in the class talked about her father. They were from Eastern Europe, and how he's been given all the worst jobs at where he works because he's from Eastern Europe, right? So having that understanding that, racism is almost like, I would probably describe it as a layer cake, right? With the chocolate frosting, which is us, on the top. And so we get the brunt of it. And let's be clear and let's be honest, as Black people, we are the most hated race in the world. And I would defy anybody to stand up and say, no, that's not the case, because we are. If you look around the world and what we've gone through, that's the reality. And we know it, and we have to survive it. And Kathy talked about resilience. We have resilience by the bucket load. We also have to have strategy and strategic ways of living our lives by the bucket load as well.
We're also the most vocal. So a lot of races handle it differently. And I think it's important that we do it. We've always seemed to do it. If you go back to Martin Luther King, when he passed laws, Martin Luther King didn't just pass laws for Black people. he passed laws for immigrants. So there's always been, for some reason, there's an attachment, not you're black, but you want to help the immigrant that came here from Mexico, or the immigrant that came here from India. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I think, because of shared experiences. If you go back to history, it started in those other countries before it got to us. And for sure, we get the brunt of it. I agree. It's a good point. But racism, because of the proximity to Europe, racism started in countries like India, and they used the tone scale and the classism to build onto slavery and to begin doing slavery in America. And they used all the funds from the countries they got from in and around Europe to fund sending the ships to America. And I think there's this, not just with the hire, just in general, like going back and trying to figure out why slavery started and how it started and how many people it involved. I think it's really valuable for students to know that, for us to know that, and for institutions to take that into consideration. Because if you go back into where the institutions got their funds, like we've put in the work. It's not a direct position at the top, but we've always been involved. And I want to go back to like shared lived experiences that Kathy pointed on. Growing up, are just because of where I grew up, there's Detroit and there's the racism there. And there's literally places where one side of the street will be black and one side of the street will be white, and they will never cross and talk. Like they won't do it. And prices of milk will be different. It's a strange place. But then in Windsor, everyone's more integrated. But then there's just outside of Windsor, there's a lot of crops, and so migrant workers will come up, and migrant workers will experience racism the same way I've experienced racism in a different form. But I could understand and relate to them in a way other people couldn't. And I always found that a lot of my friends list was not just, I had black friends, I had white friends, but I also had a lot of friends from other cultures that we had just shared experiences because of what they also went through in a different way. They may not have spoken English, so they were picked on because they didn't speak English. But I was always fine with that because I understood the dynamics and how the struggles you have to put up with. And I could teach them something, but then they taught me something. And I think that's a value to add to lived experiences, that it's not just for Black people, it's for any minority group we can really relate to, going all the way back to Martin Luther King and that law that he passed.
So, Gina, I don't know if we have questions. We want to move this on to question time.
Sure, there's no questions yet, but please feel free to add questions. Don't be shy. Go ahead, add your questions. One thing I was just kind of wondering, I mean, we've heard from Sydney a little bit, the impact on her personally, but do you have a sense of what the impact has been on the students? I know that you guys haven't actually been able to teach them in person, but do you feel like you know what that impact has been, or can you see that just by having, like Kathy said, if they might have an advisor that was different than maybe who they had before, like how's that impact? Have you noticed it yet, or know of sort of peripheral conversations?
Angela, you want to start that off?
Yeah, I've been a secondary advisor, and I'm now moving into being a primary advisor for several students. And bear in mind, I've never done this before, and I said to them, all full disclosure, I've never been a primary advisor. I actually don't really know how to do it, but then I found myself a mentor who's going to take me through that process, who's a white professor. She can take me through that process. And one of the things that I've done with these students is I've challenged them. And when they're talking about their research, I'm challenging them, and I'm saying to them, okay, have you looked at how your position, where you're starting from, and have you looked at, we have at OCAD something called the Holistic Indigenous Principles, and these are ways in which you can think about and position the way that you think, the way that you work, you know, including things like respect, relationship, reciprocation, and responsibility. And having those at the heart of how you start your research, how you position yourself, who are you aiming this research at, and or who is not, you know, in your include column, right? And so getting students to think about that before they start. And a lot of the students have said, oh yeah, I actually didn't think of that. But part of my job as the graduate program director is to actually change that. And so actually now looking at how we can include that in the curriculum, in terms of, you know, making sure that we have that as a foundation. So students are thinking about those marginalized groups, are thinking about, you know, when they are doing their work. I like to bring disruption to a lot of work that happens, because I know that a lot of students aren't thinking that way, and I just want to sort of disrupt that thinking and to completely move that in a completely different direction. So I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in there.
I'll go. I've just had messages from students or points during assignments where they're just excited about the point of view that I have due to my lived experience. So that's really where I'm seeing it. And then with obviously faculty, and then outside of faculty, people who have seen what OCAD did. But within the university and with the students, it's more when you speak with the students or when they send direct messages or track you down, they really seem to be excited about having new faces, but also new points of view and people they can relate to, whether it's from a direct cultural level, they're also Black, or just other areas where we can relate, such as what I was pointing out earlier, where they might be from a minority group.
Okay. I see there's a question
Yeah,
here.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, it just popped up.
Yeah.
And it says, what does supportive and useful white allyship look like to you as faculty and or student? So what does that supportive allyship, white allyship look like?
I think to me, as long as it comes from a honest place and it's not performative, almost any sense of support is a positive to me. Like it's a net positive. If you're posting about Black Lives Matter, whether you agree with it or not, something positive that they did, or whether you're supporting Black History Month, or a large list of powerful Black females or Black authors you should research. I think any any point of sharing that with your family or your friends and having tough discussions like what we're doing now, but with your family members, I think that's a form of showing allyship. You don't have to go out and be part of a march. You don't have to wear a t-shirt. It doesn't need to be a performance. It can literally just be worked within your day-to-day behaviors. Ask yourself why you use certain wording like Indian giver. Why maybe you should remove that. And other points we use within the English language, because it's literally based, or how we speak is, racism is literally in our language. With your friends, have a conversation. I think that, or supporting podcasts and movies, all those things are positives in the long run. I think they're all net positives rather than removing yourself from the conversation entirely. Although you're not doing anything wrong, I think it ends up being a net negative, because the whole goal is to improve society as a whole, even in the smallest amounts, whether it's your friends or your family.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that really struck me, I was at a TEDx talk in Vancouver, and there was a young speaker called Nikki Sanchez, a young Indigenous speaker. And part of her presentation was, and these words have always stuck with me, and she was talking to the audience, predominantly white audience, and she said, and I quote, you know, racism and what happened in the past is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that really comes down to the fact that, you know, we weren't there back in the past, right? When these things were happening, but we are here now. And so as we change and as we want to change, it's our responsibility to do that. So we step up, and if you're white, then we want that white allyship, because in fact, we can't change anything. As much as Dory and the other executives did at OCAD, they are still Black people, and they are not in the position to actually bang the gavel and rubber stamp what goes on, right? And so we still need that white allyship, and we still need that support.
Good point.
Yep. Okay, I think somebody has their hand up, and Eric, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. I love it, people verbally.
Can you hear me? Great. I had a question for you. I'm sure COVID is obviously affected this, but have you had any opportunities to cultivate any type of relationships with any of the Blacks who are not faculty, who are more the other areas of employment at the institution?
Absolutely. We actually have a regular meeting of all of the Black faculty, whether they are in the president's office, to staff and the librarian, to the other teaching staff. We do meet at least quarterly.
They also did what I thought was great is they did a keynote speech to introduce us to the whole university right off the jump. So that was, everyone knew who we were as soon as we got there.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that as well that I think that has been a very key part of not only the hiring, but also to bring us together as Black people within OCAD, so we can support each other. And as Kathy said, we are all over the different parts of the university. But I think to me that's a really key piece, because it's interesting because they actually do bring a different viewpoint as well, because we're in the classroom, but they're seeing other things happening within the library and etc. And so we're able to support them or make changes as well. Good question.
Good question.
I think Brian, you have your hand up.
Hey y'all, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time and you're sharing your experience with us all. Several of you on the panel have said that you've questioned if joining OCAD was for you in particular at the time initially. What made each of you shift your way of thinking to look at this opportunity at OCAD as something that may be a potentially life-changing opportunity, and how it might have a ripple effect for future Black designers?
He wants to go first.
All you, Angela. Lead it off.
I'll go.
Michael.
Reading the strategic plan, and that was I read that 2 days before the interview, and it's, what is it? I don't know, 60 pages. But just going through that, and seeing that this is wired to the infrastructure of the university by law, right? And everyone refers back to it. This is critical. If we didn't have that document, this also wouldn't have happened, right? As Angela explained earlier, the stars lined up for this to happen, and that was the convincing part. And then once accepted and signing the contract, the workshops that I attended, sometimes double. I didn't realize I was doing that but just the indigenous workshops. So all of it is there. It's just for us to take advantage, plan, as well as share the knowledge, with the students.
I would also agree that I think in looking at this strategic plan, this is what inspired me and made me think that the university was kind of on the right track in order to try and put some teeth into what normally is talked about equity and inclusion. My sister talks about that is hopes and prayers. But this is the university actually saying it's not just hopes and prayers. We're actually going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to hire Black faculty in order to help achieve the strategic vision that we have set for our institution. And that's what moved me from saying, like, I don't know that the university will pick me, but this is the place that I want to be. And so for me, that was my hesitation, is would they actually really pick me? But, but it's not that, but it's my dream position. And so, I just said, I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring, because this may never happen in my lifetime again, to see this type of job or this type of position come about. And so that's what moved me from a question mark to let's just do it. Yeah.
For me,
I have to agree. I actually didn't think I had a cat in hell's chance, as the saying goes, of getting this position at all, because I knew what the traditional hiring was, and I didn't fit that mold at all. And like Michael, for me, it was just like, oh, it's there. Oh, should I do it? Shouldn't I? No, forget it. And then really, like at the last minute, I threw my hat in the ring on that one as well.
I knew it as soon as I saw it. I wanted to do it as like a challenge. I just wanted to put together like the best package I could. So I went all in. I went hard. And then it took quite a bit of time before I heard back. And then when I actually met Dory and the other people on the committee, I really was doing it as like just a challenge for myself the whole time, until I met the committee, and I was like, yeah, this is it. This is good. The how they worded the document that applied to me was, as I said many times, it was perfectly done. And then the people they had on the board, including having student representation, was very well done. And they asked great questions, but then I also asked some questions, and they were open to them and had really solid answers. So it was really what sold me was them.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, go ahead, Michael.
No, it's okay. I spoke already. Go ahead. Let's move on.
No, I was just saying there's another question in there. If you guys want to, I can read it out to you, or this is from Michael Lewis. I teach on campus of statewide technical college in Texas. I'm the only Black faculty member in the system. 3 years ago, I served as the head of our visual communications department teaching graphic design. It took about 15 years to get that position. I was demoted to instructional business manager, and a white faculty member was made a statewide department chair. Now, due to COVID-19, that our program is completely online. What would you suggest I do to recruit more Black, brown students? Are you guys, second question, are you guys being asked to participate in the recruitment of Black students? If so, in what way and what are you doing?
I wasn't asked directly, but that's part of our job, right? We're an institute, and we're supported by the strategic plan, the document, and it's a really good school, right? And so I don't mind, and part of our purpose is to attract the Black and brown community, and to basically let the parents know that we're here for to get their children through. We're not gonna do this do what we call a pappy show, a song and dance, and then leave them to their own devices. This is our goal, because I know what it's like to go through that system. In talking to one student last week, I asked him what were the percentages of colored Black BIPOC teachers that he had, and he said 25%. And I said, well, I'm below 5% throughout my life, right? So I really do know what that's like. And for us just to be there and provide some sort of comfort to get them through is part of our job, as well as adjusting I know from the Caribbean perspective, art and design is not their first choice for parents, right? They're telling you to go to engineering or accounting or whatever it is. And here am I, an example, a faculty member that got the job, and I'm doing it. So I have to show them by example. I have to lead by example and provide the support as well.
And I'd like to say, Michael, that there is so much to unpack in your question that you asked. And in part, it may be difficult to recruit Black and Brown students when they see how a Black faculty member is disrespected in what I read in your question. So that's a place to start. Is to how can Black students be supported when faculty aren't supported? But the other part of that question, in terms of being involved in recruitment, I think that to build on what Michael was saying is that in part we are all out there, just like we are speaking to you today. We are ever present, speaking around the communities in order to present that we are at OCAD, that this is what it looks like to be an artist and designer, and that's okay, and that's a path to take. I would say that the place where we probably, since I've been reviewing a lot of applications, I would say that probably one of the next steps that we could do is supporting young people and putting together portfolios. Because I think that from my experience in mentoring other people to put together portfolios to go to art schools is that Black and Brown children often haven't had that type of social capital that will show what a good portfolio actually looks like. So that's a space that, and just so you get rejected just because you didn't put together a good portfolio. And so, that's a space where I think that we all can actually work in order to be able to not only improve recruitment of Black and Brown youth, but also hopefully help them to be accepted.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that the fact that this process has just started in terms of the Black cluster hire, and we're seeing already now. Sydney has been one of our students. She's experienced university life without the cluster hire, and in her final year, she's been able to experience that. And the beautiful thing is, she's now going on to the beginnings of her career through another form of cluster hire within the actual industry. So this goes beyond the university in terms of looking at how you can diversify and bring strength to your workforce, your student life, your faculty, your industry, etc. So right here, we're almost seeing that sort of loop. So in terms of that recruitment part of it, the community can look at OCAD and say, look, they've got Black professors. Look, our Black people are actually going out into the industry and being accepted and being valued as well. So we're hoping to continue that circle.
I agree. I just want to toss this in real quick, there's definitely that, but also you have to go where they are. And because of budgets and finances, one of the best locations to reach, I find, this is again my opinion, is online, things like Instagram. So improving your online representation of Black and Brown people, decolonizing your Instagram, which OCAD's working on, is a work in progress. But that's one place to guarantee that you don't need a budget. You don't need to have family who's connected. You don't need to have all these additional tools. You just can be on Instagram and you can see those options. And I think that's a great way to recruit Black and Brown students as well.
Okay. Go ahead, Sydney.
I was going to say, in terms of what's actually at OCAD, I can drop I'll drop a specific link in the chat, but there are a few different recruitment tools that OCAD uses for specifically for Black students. And when it comes to visibility on social media, there's also, it has been something that OCAD's been working on, but I think this past year for Black History Month was really great because the Black Student Association was really pushing towards that visibility. They were really pushing towards organizing things all month, and I got to be a part of that in I got to make a 10-minute video about myself and my design practice to put out into the world. And, you know, the support that OCAD puts behind specifically the student union, because that was all done through student union grants, the support that the university puts behind that kind of visibility is, I think, what's going to help recruit more Black students.
100%. Visibility, 100%. Good point.
Okay, I just want to say thank you guys. I know we're at our, we're a little over our time. There's never enough time. So we have a link, and hold on, the link, just give me a second. I'm going to post it again. It should be working now, for a survey, if you guys don't mind. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. And I feel like it's just, obviously, it's just like you said, this is just like the tease, the beginning. And I love to hear that other schools are doing it. I hope it comes to the United States, that we can do something like this. And so, yeah, thanks. Oh, and also one thing really awesome, Kathy shared the prompt for the job, so we can kind of see what that language was and see why it attracted such great candidates. So so again, thank you guys so much, and hopefully this is just the beginning. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sydney. Thank you, Gina.